Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, interesting outrage over the Super Bowl halftime performance. We'll get into all the details coming up. And a good Monday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen to the show after the fact as well by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our show this morning is brought to you by Melissa Gott and her team over at the Law Group in Wilmington. You can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. Of course, taking all of the air out of the room on this Monday is the Super Bowl, which by all accounts, by all metrics, whatever sort of data you would like to use, is by far the largest sporting event that takes place in America each year. Often it is the largest and most viewed television event that takes place in America all throughout the year. Individuals that don't even really follow the sport take a good chunk of their day on Super Bowl Sunday, meet up with their friends, meet up with family. Super Bowl parties taking place all across the United States of America. It is a major sporting event that happens here across the country. And so in the build-up, in the lead-up to this Super Bowl, there has been a lot of political discussion taking place, which, let me just take a step back and say, is a major problem. A major problem. Many of you have heard me talk about this in the past. One of the reasons that individuals like sports and video games and other sorts of activities and hobbies is it gives them a break. And I find myself in this position, somebody that works very close to the political sphere, somebody that hosts a podcast and radio show and goes through the news cycle day in and day out. Starts very early in the morning for me and goes through the entirety of the day. And so when I turn to a sporting event, whether it's football or baseball, or obviously the Olympics ongoing right now, it, for me, and I think for many Americans, is an attempt to break from the news cycle, break from politics, break from world news in many cases, which is not good. I mean, good news very infrequently gets the top headlines. Good news is not reported all of the time. And so you use these kind of avenues, whether it's sports and sporting events, things like video games and books and things of that nature. You use that, I use that as a break from reality. Just an opportunity to take a step back from, unfortunately, what most of the time is a lot of decisive conversation, a lot of arguments, a lot of standing up back and forth political debate. It's very nice and very refreshing, and I would argue very necessary to get a break from that. If you are spending every second of your being super invested and super involved in everything that's ongoing politically, I would argue at a certain point that would make you kind of crazy. It just becomes your entire being, right? This is something that I have highlighted, and I think many of you have highlighted as well, is a major problem with the left. They eat, breathe, and sleep politics. They eat, breathe, and sleep their political ideology and their political agenda. They cannot roll out of bed in the morning without the first thing coming to their mind: how am I going to push my agenda forward today? How am I going to get in the face of individuals that I disagree with politically and shove my opinion, shove my agenda down their throat, whether they're asking for it or not, right? That is part of the reason why the left and these more activist types on the political left are so out of favor with the vast majority of Americans. I understand and fully commit to the idea that politics is important. And none of what I'm saying in the discussion that we're going to have today should lead you to the conclusion that you should tune out of political conversation. The fact that you are listening to a show like this is a strong indication that you are politically involved, that you're interested in politics at some level, which I will contend is a good thing, because unfortunately, way too many across our country, way too many here in North Carolina are not engaged in that process. And it leads to, in a lot of cases, terrible election results, which are bad for the people that live in those areas. You can look at all of our wonderful blue cities across North Carolina: Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, Asheville, soon to be, unfortunately, Wilmington, with its new 7-0 Democrat majority on its city council. And so we need people to be, I would argue, we need people to be politically engaged. We need people to be politically involved. But there also needs to be a break from that. There also needs to be an opportunity to step back from that for, not major stints of time. I'm not talking about, breaking away for months, but there needs to be an opportunity to take a step back from that and enjoy something that isn't shoving some sort of political opinion, some sort of political agenda in your face. And this is a growing trend that the left cannot seem to break away from. They are vested at this point in shoving politics into everything. We just talked about it. Was it last week with the Grammys? This is an award show for the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. These are musicians. These individuals have unimaginable amounts of wealth. They own properties all over the United States, private jets, yachts, just a whole litany of stuff that 90+% of Americans will never even have the ability to touch in their lifetime. And so you've got this award show, the Grammys, taking place last week, and the entire event is full of liberal elitists standing up on stage talking about politics. For what reason? I have no idea. I guess because they feel like it is their duty as activists to push things forward. It is their duty to lead the good fight and continue to push forward, I think, what many find not popular political opinions and identities. And I think, in the short term, these groups can kind of pat themselves on the back and claim that, again, they're fighting the good fight. They're standing up to fascism. They're standing up to the authoritarian nature of this administration. So there might be some sort of immediate short-term rush that they get from that. Long-term, however, I think it is a very, frankly, stupid thing to do, because you turn everything into a political spectacle if you're on the left, which of course runs and controls all of these various events and shows. You watch the Academy Awards, the Emmys, any of these award shows, it's full of a bunch of liberal West Coast elitists that, as I talked about the Grammys last week, have no clue what it is like to be a regular, everyday citizen of this country and go through the motions. They can't comprehend it. Many of them may have grown up like that, but they are now incredibly disconnected from that reality. And so the long-term damage of this, and I believe that the process is already starting, is you're just turning half of the country off from what you're producing. You are turning half of the country off, and you can say, oh well, maybe it's less than half. I mean, just go back to November of 2024. It was an overwhelming election majority. Was it 73 plus million people voting for Donald Trump? That, by any metric, is a large amount of the population, a large amount of the public. And so when you spit in the face of those individuals consistently, over and over and over again, and use your platform, which for many is a break from the nastiness and the vitriol and the hatred that is politics, music, TV, sports, video games. Pick your poison. Pick it, whatever one you want. When that starts becoming political, you then tune out. You then say, I'm going to find something else to consume. I'm going to find something else to take up this time in which I was going to try and kick back and relax, but I no longer can do that. I no longer have been put in the situation where I'm interested in somebody pandering to me about politics when I'm just trying to get a little break from reality, which I think is what a lot of individuals do when they're tuning into a major sporting event, going to the movies, watching a television series. They just want a little bit of a break from reality. And the left just seemingly cannot give it to them. They just can't. Turning our attention to the Super Bowl last night, the game itself, not an extraordinary game unless you find yourself to be a very defensive-minded football fan, it featured a controversial halftime show. And the rumor and the discussion of this had begun to take place months before, when it was announced that Bad Bunny would be performing at the halftime show, which, in case you weren't aware, the halftime show is an unpaid gig, which is kind of interesting. It is the largest sporting event that takes place in the United States every year. NBC, who broadcast the Super Bowl last night, made somewhere in the ballpark of $800 to $900 million just on advertising for the event, maybe even north of that. Could have been easily north of $1 billion just worth of advertising for one 4 or 5 hour sporting event, when everything, pregame and all of that stuff gets tied into it. A very impressive amount of money, but the halftime show is unpaid, which is kind of interesting, and it's led to some interesting performances over the last couple of years. And so, with Bad Bunny being announced as the halftime show speaker or the halftime show performer, a lot of individuals started to be rather frustrated with that. And why? Well, he is a Spanish-speaking singer. He performed his entire set, and all of his popular music is not performed in English. And let's be clear, there's nothing wrong with speaking Spanish. There's nothing wrong with speaking a different language. However, 90% of the American population does not speak Spanish. Depending on what numbers you look at, you'll find numbers between about 8 and 12% of the U.S. population that speaks Spanish. A large group, sure, but look at the other number. Anywhere between 85 to 90% of individuals do not. So you have this major U.S. sporting event, the largest that takes place every year, and the halftime show, which has been known over generations now to be one of the cornerstone events of the Super Bowl, is being hosted by a guy that doesn't speak English. Or he may speak it, but all of his music is in a foreign language. Something is just odd about that. Something with that just doesn't make sense. It is, I'll set the stage just one more time for you. It is the largest American sporting event that happens every year. There is no other event that rivals the viewership and the audience that the Super Bowl pulls in the United States. Now, that's not to say that the Super Bowl doesn't have a large international audience. It does. But the sport that we're talking about, when we say football, we're not talking about what they in Europe call football, which is here what we call soccer. We're talking about American football, which, yes, has international games and all of that, and I'm sure had a large viewership all over the world on Sunday or maybe Monday morning, depending on your time zone. But it's the American Super Bowl. It is when you kind of close your eyes and think of some of the important American events that happen every year, the Super Bowl is probably close towards the top of that list because it is viewed by so many people. The commercials are incredibly expensive, millions of dollars for a single 15 or 30-second commercial. A very, very expensive, well-viewed, well-attended event. And so there is just something odd with having a performance in a foreign language, regardless of what language it is, having a performance in a foreign language during the largest American sporting event. Now, also add on top of this that Bad Bunny, who was the guy that performed last night out in San Francisco at the Super Bowl, also happens to be a left-wing political activist who in the past couple of weeks has had situations where he has decided that he is going to, like so many others that we see in Hollywood or so many others that we see in the music sector, decided that he's going to get in on a situation where he is going to become the political hero for the left. Recently saying F ICE, making comments about immigration and customs enforcement, very typical to what you see with so many of these other loons on the left. And I think I would argue the most interesting part in all of this was watching individuals last night rant and rave about the Super Bowl performance. And it was largely political. I mean, I saw post after post on my Facebook and X feeds last night of individuals who I know for a fact do not speak a lick of Spanish. I mean, their Spanish education may have been a middle or high school class. These individuals could not form even the most basic sentence, ranting and raving over how amazing the halftime show was. And they weren't talking about the artistic performance, of which I'll note was actually pretty cool. The setup, there was essentially a whole city that was built in the middle of the middle of the football field in which the performance took place. From an artistic standpoint, pretty well produced, pretty well done. But to see a bunch of lefties, a bunch of Democrats and liberals ranting and raving over a halftime show that they literally could not understand a single word of just goes to show you the problem that exists right now. Because it wasn't about the musical performance. It wasn't about the language that was being spoken. It wasn't about the cinematography. It wasn't about the set design. It wasn't about the dancing. No, it wasn't about any of that. It was the fact that Bad Bunny has in recent weeks been in the news for his anti-immigration stance. He has recently come forward as anti-ICE. And so because of that, he is now therefore a hero and champion of the left. And so it had nothing to do with his music, nothing to do with the words, nothing to do with the language, everything to do with politics, which is exactly what I feel is the opposite of something like the Super Bowl. President Donald Trump commenting on the situation on Truth Social, saying, "The Super Bowl halftime show is absolutely terrible. One of the worst ever. It makes no sense, is an affront to the greatness of America, and doesn't represent our standards of success, creativity, or excellence. Nobody understands a word this guy is saying, and the dancing is disgusting, especially for young children that are watching from throughout the United States and all over the world. This show is a slap in the face to our country, which is setting new standards and records every single day." He goes on and on and on, saying there is nothing inspirational about this mess of a halftime show, and watch, it will get great reviews from the fake news media because they haven't got a clue what's going on in the real world. And by the way, the NFL should immediately replace its ridiculous new kickoff rule, "Make America Great Again," President Donald Trump. So a little bit of sports talk, a little bit of a discussion about the Super Bowl performance in itself, where once again, those on the political left have taken an opportunity to shove more politics, more agendas, and more narratives in your face. And I think we are at the breaking point now where the American people are saying enough. We're over it. We don't want this anymore. We just want to be able to enjoy Super Bowl Sunday with our friends and family members, have a couple of beers, eat some pizza and some chicken wings, and watch hopefully a good football game and an interesting performance. But the left just can't allow that to happen. They just can't. And I think long term, it is going to be incredibly detrimental to them and their political movement. So as we talk about this Super Bowl halftime show that took place on NBC at the actual Super Bowl, TPUSA, that's of course Charlie Kirk's, the late Charlie Kirk's organization, hosted what they called an alternative halftime show. It was called the Turning Point USA's All-American Halftime Show, with it officially being headlined by Kid Rock and a couple of other singers as well, with all of the views tallied in, and some of this is still a little skeptical. It can take a couple of days to get these final ratings and numbers. We are looking at viewership as potentially as much as 25 million people across all of the different social media channels. There was a couple of cable networks that broadcasted as well. Platforms like X and Facebook and YouTube and Rumble, all of these different platforms, potentially upwards of 25 million people tuned in to this alternative halftime show. And that should be in itself a wake-up call for those on the political left. That is not a small number of people. And I saw posts, and yes, I am in somewhat of an echo chamber with the individuals that I am friends with and follow on social media. I'm not oblivious to that fact. I saw people that I was not even familiar with in terms of their political, ideology or their political agenda, posting about the TPUSA alternative halftime show, talking about how much they enjoyed that performance. Individuals that, again, I didn't know were overly political and I would have assumed would not be tuning in. And so TPUSA, whether you like the organization or not, was clearly able to capitalize on what had turned into a relatively controversial situation. So this brings me to a larger discussion that I've had for years now, and we've talked about a variety of different times. And it is the disconnect between Hollywood and the rest of America. And when I say Hollywood, I'm not just talking about actors and actresses in movies. We're talking about music, television, and of course, film and things of that nature. And you can, I think, throw some of the news media into this group of Hollywood as well. And it's not necessarily maybe the most accurate term to describe these individuals, but it works. When you say Hollywood elites, you know exactly who we're talking about. You know the group that we're trying to cover. And so I caught a very, very interesting article. I guess Hillsdale College used to have a physical paper that they still might. They had this paper called, this paper that I found from the early 2000s, July of 2002, excuse me. July of 2002 is when this article was published. Its headline, "The Disconnect Between Hollywood and America." The author of said article, again, published more than 20 years ago, was Pat Sajak, who, of course, you are very, very well familiar with as the longtime host of Wheel of Fortune. And so I wanted to read through a little bit of this. I wanted to go through it. This is a 20-plus-year-old article. And as I was reading through this on Sunday, it was amazing to me how in touch and accurate something like this still is. If you typically find something, especially something that is an opinion piece or a news article, 20 years ago, the whole thing is irrelevant. And there are parts that are no longer relevant and timely. But overall, this was a really well-written piece by Pat Sajak back in 2002. So I just wanted to go through a little bit of this because it's obviously not a new discussion. It's obviously not a new conversation by any stretch of the imagination. So it starts off by saying this. Here, in this quiet, peaceful corner of Michigan, you might not have a sense of your importance in the world. I come from a community that has the opposite problem because it is so big and so powerful, so great and so well known. It has extravagant views of its significance. The community is Hollywood. Not Hollywood the town. Not much small show business actually goes on there. Most of the studios are spread around other Southern California communities like Culver City or Burbank. But I mean Hollywood, the entertainment mecca, which includes parts of Southern California, New York City, and because news has become entertainment, some of Washington, D.C., as well. While I work in Hollywood, I live elsewhere. My family and I live in a quiet suburb of Annapolis, Maryland. The kids go to school there. They live near their grandparents, my in-laws, and most of my neighbors care very little about the overnight ratings, box office grosses, and sweeps weeks. We don't hate LA, in fact. We like it, and we spend a great deal of time there. But I happen to have a job that allows me a great deal of flexibility, and that gives me the luxury of living a real life in addition to my fake one. That's a very interesting phrasing. I love how that's written. He also lives a real life in addition to the fake one, the one that is promoted on television. You see, one of the dangers of my business is that it has the potential to fill you with a distorted view of life and of your importance in it. And it's understandable in a way. If you're part of a successful enterprise, people treat you very well. They send limos for you. They tiptoe around you. They pretend that the most outlandish or insane things you might say are important and quotable. Drugs, adultery, alcoholism, deviant behavior. Don't worry. You go on with your Oprah You Cry people call for your heroic for being so open, and your career soars to a new high. You're treated importantly, so you must therefore be important. Suddenly, your views are not just your own private opinions. They become part of the public record. They quote you on Entertainment Tonight and in People magazine. You can endorse a candidate, fight for a cause, call people names. It's pretty heavy stuff. The world waits breathlessly for your next pronouncement. And then he goes into Rosie O'Donnell. A daytime talk show host goes public with her sexual preference, and she is lauded as brave. Pat Sajak writes, again, all the way back in 2002. What exactly is brave about that? First of all, who cares? And what's brave about getting the chance to be interviewed by ABC and landing on magazine covers? I don't mean to pick on Miss O'Donnell, but it's just another example of the self-importance that show business can bestow upon you. The idea that your sexual preference matters to anyone other than your immediate family and your partners or partners seems rather silly to me. Speaking of silly, Alec Baldwin, an actor, recently compared the election of George W. Bush to the terrorist attacks of last September. This is the same Baldwin brother who promised to leave the country if Bush were elected. Sadly, he reneged on that one. Baldwin also went on Conan O'Brien's late night show during the Clinton impeachment to say that Illinois Republican Congressman Henry Hyde should be shot along with his family. Do remarks like this get chastised in Hollywood, ostracized, marginalized? No, it's Alec Baldwin. He's an actor. He's in show business. He's important. I wasn't kidding you when I mentioned how timely this article still was, how timely this op-ed from Pat Sajak still was. This thing was written July of almost 24 years ago, published by Hillsdale Magazine. And hilariously, some of the same cast of characters, Alec Baldwin, who in recent years has had nothing but a complete and total public freakout over Donald Trump. Rosie O'Donnell, who I'm not even sure if she's still living in the United States, is constantly posting on social media some of the most ridiculous videos and commentary and things that you can possibly imagine. And so even more, almost a quarter century ago, these same two individuals were making a situation into one that somebody like Pat Sajak, who even now is still well known, but in 2002 would have been the tip of the spear as it relates to popular individuals on television. I mean, back in the early 2000s, and even to some extent now, shows like Wheel of Fortune are incredibly, incredibly popular. And so we'll get into more on this opinion piece from Pat Sajak coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Before that, I do want to tell you about the Law Group here in Wilmington and thank them for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show, and remind you that when legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the Law Group. They are right here located in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across eastern North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense. If so, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, ladies and gentlemen. They are located here in downtown Wilmington. They live in our community. They're neighbors. They go to the shops and stores and restaurants that you and I do. And they're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088. Or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. Give them a call, 910-251-6088, or online at lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group and their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. We'll get into some of your comments, pretty funny comments, and more from this as it's listed in this old Hillsdale article. Patrick L. Sajak article. He was the host of Wheel of Fortune from 2002. We'll get into more of that coming up as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a Monday morning, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Good Monday to you, and welcome back to the Nick Craig Show on this February the 9th as we continue this broader discussion over the need, the need by those on the political left to take politics, take their political identity, take their agenda, and shove it into everything that they do: music, TV, films, pro sports, video games. I mean, it's in every facet, seemingly, of our society now, when I think more and more people want to relax, get a break from the news cycle. Just look at what's going on in the news right now. For a search now going on more than a week for Savannah Guthrie's mother. She was kidnapped from her house at 2:00 in the morning by unknown captives that are asking for a multi-million-dollar ransom. I mean, it's just miserable. The news is so damn depressing constantly. And so people just want a break. People just want a little bit of a break from, unfortunately, what is a lot of the awful in real world. And so they want to zone out in front of the TV for a couple of hours and watch a football game, watch a movie, watch a television show without having to hear about social equality and justice this and DEI that and all this other garbage. They just want to break for just a couple of hours, 3-4 hours. And you seemingly can't get it anywhere in society right now. So I found this very interesting piece from a magazine that I don't know that Hillsdale College still publishes, but they were publishing back in 2002, more than 20 years ago. And the op-ed is written by Pat Sajak, the longtime host of Wheel of Fortune, with the headline, "The Disconnect Between Hollywood and America." Right before the break, he was commenting about Alec Baldwin and Rosie O'Donnell, who are still, of course, relevant freedom fighters right now, pushing their left-wing agenda. Great comment coming in. Alec Baldwin talking about shooting people in 2002. You can't make this stuff up. Because apparently he was back in 2001, I guess. Baldwin was on Conan O'Brien's first iteration of his late night show when he commented that an Illinois Republican congressman, I should say, should be shot along with his family. So back to the Sajak piece, which is amazing that it is still so timely, even more than 20 years later. He writes, "The silliness and outrageousness that emanates from Hollywood comes from the non-performers as well. Ted Turner once mocked his employees who had ashes on their foreheads for Ash Wednesday as Jesus freaks. Mr. Turner, a self-proclaimed protector of human rights, apparently has his limits. Filmmaker Rob Reiner, a co-founder of Castle Rock Entertainment, is reportedly upset by what he sees in many films these days, and he plans to do something about it. In fact, he's so upset about this thing, anyone who wants to depict in his Castle Rock film must meet Reiner's first order to justify its inclusion. So what's got Rob so upset? Gratuitous violence, casual sex, disrespect towards Christianity, biased against big business? Is that what he wants to cut down on or eliminate? No, of course not. That would be censorship. He wants to get rid of smoking. He says that there's too much smoking in movies. And so this portion of the article is a little less timely, as cigarettes, the consumption and production has gone way down and is not anywhere near as popular in media as it used to be. But it goes on. And he says, "I could go on with a laundry list of silly and hypocritical things said and done by some of my fellow show business luminaries. But the point here is not to make them look silly. They're perfectly capable of doing that without my help. The larger point is the disconnect between the realities of this nation and its people and the perceived realities of many in entertainment communities. I don't mean to sound too harsh or hypocritical. After all, I seem perfectly happy to have cashed my checks for more than 30 years that I've been in television. And I'm not exactly working on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I do make a living by selling vowels and spinning a giant multicolored wheel. So who am I to be pointing fingers? Well, I'm just someone who wants to feel prouder than he does, as proud as he once was, about what's going on in this industry. And that's why I spend only part of my time around it. I need to step back occasionally, and I think it does help me see the world more clearly. And the irony of it all, whether it is from my home in Maryland or from your classroom here in Hillsdale College, you, in a very real way, are more aware of what this nation and the world are about than the supposedly well-connected and in-tune people who inhabit our media culture." It then goes into some discussion about what was going on at CBS News at the time, and so I'll skip that part, not super relevant either, timely in nature of that. But then it ends by saying this, and again, speaking to students at Hillsdale College. "Well, you are this country. You are its future, and I think that's a very good thing to be. The world can look mighty dark and forbidden at times, but how exciting to be in the position to help change all of that. And you're at the center of it. The center is not Los Angeles or New York. The power is not Hollywood or Washington. The power is here. Oh, you may end up in one of those locations, but look what you will bring with it. This place, its ideals, its strengths, its traditions. You will have spent these formative years in a setting where ideas can be discussed and treated with respect, where the great traditions of this nation and its cultural heritage have been passed on to you, and through you, you will be passed on to countless others. No matter how you eventually make your living or whether or where you live your life, your time here at Hillsdale helps assure that you will have a positive impact on your generation. That strikes me as an excellent start on your legacy. I will take a small part of Hillsdale with me when I leave, and I envy the big part that each of you will carry throughout your lives. This resource, this power is reality, not the media's version of it, and you possess it. Use it wisely. Thank you. So that was the letter written in a Hillsdale publication by the longtime host of Wheel of Fortune, Pat Sajak, back in July of 2002, which I will contend was a pretty long time ago. You look at what has gone on in this country since 2002, especially in the political space. Right? You saw, obviously, we had the terror attacks of 2001, not less than a year before this article was published. You then, of course, had the rise of Barack Obama, Donald Trump, the first go around, Joe Biden, now Trump again. And so, while so much has changed, so much has stayed the same. And that's what makes this article from 2002 so interesting. Because so much of what Pat Sajak writes in this article, which I'll link up over in the show notes at patreon.com/Nick Craig, so much of what he writes is so true even to this day. And I don't mean this in any sort of disrespect towards Pat Sajak, but you would not consider him some sort of scholar of the time, right? You wouldn't describe him as a founding father that had this this amazing amount of wisdom and whatnot. I mean, he even says it in jokes. Yeah, I make my living spinning a big giant colored wheel and selling vows to people. And so he was able to clue in on this stuff almost 24 years ago. And so that brings us to where we are right now. That brings us to what many of you saw or maybe didn't see, maybe read about at the Super Bowl last night. Hollywood, the liberal elitists that run Hollywood, that are in the minds and in the ears of all of these music types, these film stars, these television stars, they truly have absolutely no idea what is going on the ground across America. They have no way to understand what things are actually happening. They do not use pivotal things like the reelection of Donald Trump to say, maybe we're a little bit out of touch. Maybe we're a little bit out of tune with what's going on. No, they seem completely unwilling to do that. And I think long term, it is going to do an incredible amount of damage to those on the political left. It is going to hurt their brand. I'll state the point one more time. People are looking for a break from reality. They're looking for a break from all of the stresses that they see and have to deal with day in and day out. And the left just cannot allow them to do it. And it is pushing more and more people away from their cause. I believe that wholeheartedly. It just doesn't make any sense. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, there might be that kind of short-term adrenaline rush. There might be a short-term, all these liberals and all these morons on social media are posting about how great it was that Billie Eilish stood up during the Grammy Awards and said, F-U-C-K ICE. Oh, wow. Pat yourself on the back. You're so brave. Right? As Sajak used in the article, Rosie O'Donnell going on national television saying, I'm gay. Who the hell cares? I don't, frankly, give a shit what Billie Eilish thinks about immigration policy. And I have no reason to. She's not an elected official. She writes music, which is an important part of culture. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. But she's not an elected official. She's not a policymaker. And I would argue her influence is relatively limited. I mean, yes, congratulations. You stood up on the Grammys, stood up during the Grammys in front of all of your rich liberal friends proclaiming about stolen ground, of which you have like some $18 million mansion in California that by definition is on stolen land. But you're proclaiming about stolen land and all of these injustices and all this other nonsense to your entire echo chamber. And that's what the left has really cultivated with all of this. It is one huge echo chamber. It is one huge silo where there is no diversity of thought, no diversity of ideas, nobody to question or counter anything that leaves these fools' mouths. Nothing is questioned because they've completely insulated themselves. One of the things that I will always recommend to those on the political right, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. I will fully admit you will spend a lot of your time rolling your eyes and just kind of scoffing at what you're watching. You need to tune into CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, and CBS. Now, I'm not saying that you should spend your entire day watching these outlets. But I will contend to you, it is very important to hear and listen to what the other side is saying. Now, I will admit, you're probably going to disagree with the vast majority of what you hear. But I think, at least from my vantage point, I think it's important for me to hear that. I think it's important to hear what the other side is saying, to listen to the arguments that they're making. Not that they're going to convince me that everything that I believe is wrong. I don't think there's any likelihood of that happening. But it does, the old saying is, was it iron sharpens iron or steel sharpens steel, whatever it is. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. I'm very politically involved. I'm very politically opinionated. For anybody that's followed me for any stretch of time, you know that very well. And so I'm not offended when my ideas are challenged. I don't attempt to block out and shut out anybody that has a differing viewpoint or a different idea. One of the things that I loved doing the most when I was hosting mornings here in Wilmington was when people would call in and disagree with me. Not because I wanted to get into some sort of yelling and screaming match with them. That never took place. But I always have loved having a legitimate debate. I've always loved honest back and forth conversation, even from people that I disagree with. And unfortunately, we seem to have lost that ability. There is very little honest conversation that takes place. There is very little legitimate intellectual discussion that goes on across the political lines, and that's a problem. And it's a big, I think I would contend to you, it's a bigger problem for the left right now, but the right is not immune to it. And maybe some of you, no offense, but you've done a similar thing. You've only surrounded yourself with viewpoints and commentary and information that kind of feeds your bias and feeds your narrative. I would contend to you that is a bad thing on both sides. One thing I will say is that conservatives and Republicans, they are seemingly more willing to listen to what the other side has to say. Now, I'm not speaking for everybody, and I'm sure plenty of people on the left that are interested in different discussions and debate as well. I'm not painting with a broad brush. I'm not saying, every single person. No, I think in some level of generalities, I think the right tends to be more open to this stuff than the left does. And so I will contend to you, it is very important to have what I'll call a healthy media diet that exists, that has opposing viewpoints, opposing opinions, different, roundups of what's going on. It's why I make sure I'm constantly, tuning into and reading what is being published by some of these left-wing news organizations. I know where they stand. I know where their bias is. And I would contend to you, it's important for you to read that stuff, and may make you a little bit sharper when a situation, unfolds that requires some level of political debate, some level of political discussion. So we'll this is something that I would consider I would say I'm pretty passionate about as somebody that is always looking for a break from politics and from news. Very disappointing to see that the left continues to shove their stupid narratives and agendas into everybody's face 24/7. Coming up here if you're watching us live this morning, coming up here in a little over an hour, we are expecting an explosive hearing within the North Carolina General Assembly. Members of the House Select Committee on Oversight and Reform are set to grill Charlotte area officials, including the mayor, Vi Lyles, the sheriff, and Gary McFadden, over out-of-control crime and safety concerns in our state's largest city. Obviously, back in August of last year, Charlotte got into the news not because of anything great, but because Irina Zarutska was brutally murdered and stabbed on a Charlotte light rail when she was trying to, just get home from work. So that is taking place at 9 o'clock this morning. I'll be posting clips on social media throughout the day, and I'll have a full rundown, a full recap of that meeting, which I would suspect is probably going to get pretty heated and pretty out of control with those Charlotte area officials coming up tomorrow morning right here on the Nick Craig Show. Well, that is going to do it for a Monday edition. Thanks to the Law Group in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Also plays weeknights, 9 p.m. on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. That's going to do it. We're back with you tomorrow morning right here.